Damien Marchetti had issued thousands of orders throughout his career. Some had launched million-dollar business deals. Others had ended wars between rival families before a single bullet could be fired. None of them had ever sounded as ridiculous as the one he delivered on a quiet Monday morning. "From this moment on, no man speaks to my assistant without my approval." Silence crushed the executive conference room. Capos stared at one another. Lawyers exchanged confused glances. Even Damien's head of security wondered if he had misheard. One brave executive finally cleared his throat. "Boss, has someone compromised Miss Sullivan?" "No." "A security breach?" "No." "Corporate espionage?" "No." "Then, why?" Damien slowly closed the folder in front of him. "Because I'm making it policy." No explanation followed. None was offered, and nobody was foolish enough to demand one. Within 30 minutes, every department inside Marchetti Holdings received the strangest internal directive anyone had ever seen. Employees read it twice, then a third time. Receptionists whispered. Accountants frowned. Even veteran bodyguards looked genuinely puzzled. Meanwhile, the woman responsible for the organization's newest policy sat quietly behind her desk, completely unaware. Autumn Sullivan adjusted her glasses before adding another reminder to Damien's afternoon calendar. A birthday cake for Security Team Bravo. Anniversary flowers for the accounting manager. 3 thank you cards for maintenance workers who had stayed overnight fixing electrical problems. She smiled to herself. There. Nobody would be forgotten. When one of the receptionists hurried over, carrying a printed copy of the new directive, Autumn read it carefully, then shrugged. "Huh." The receptionist blinked. "That's your reaction?" Autumn nodded. "I guess Mr. Marchetti wants communication to be more organized." "That's all you think?" "Sure." She offered an innocent smile. "He probably wants fewer interruptions during work hours." The receptionist slowly walked away. "She's serious." Autumn had worked for Damien for nearly 3 years. During that time, she had become the invisible heartbeat of the organization. She remembered everyone's birthdays without checking a calendar. She knew which security guard secretly preferred vanilla cake over chocolate. She knew which lawyer drank coffee with cinnamon instead of sugar. She remembered whose daughter had just started college, whose wife had recovered from surgery, whose son had won a baseball championship. None of those details appeared in any personnel file. Autumn simply remembered because she cared. Every Friday morning, she arrived nearly an hour early, carrying paper bags from a local bakery. Cookies appeared in the reception area. Fresh muffins somehow reached overnight security teams before they clocked out. The maintenance crew regularly discovered handwritten thank you notes tucked beside their toolboxes. Nobody ever knew how she found time. Nobody questioned it. They simply smiled whenever they saw her walking through the building. Even men whose reputations terrified entire cities softened around Autumn Sullivan. "Morning, Miss Sullivan." "Good morning, Mr. Alvarez." "I brought those reports." "Thank you. You remembered my daughter's graduation." "I remembered because you looked proud." The aging capo laughed. "I was." She handed him a small gift bag. "I saw this bookmark and thought she'd like it." His expression froze. "You bought this?" "It wasn't expensive." "That's not what I asked." Autumn merely smiled again. "Have a wonderful day." The old capo watched her disappear down the hallway, then quietly muttered, "She's too good for this place." Unfortunately, someone else had witnessed the entire exchange. From the second-floor balcony overlooking the lobby, Damien stood perfectly still. His expression revealed nothing. Only Lorenzo, his lifelong consigliere, noticed the tiny muscle tightening near Damien's jaw. "Boss? You've been staring for nearly 3 minutes." "I have not." "You have." Damien looked away. Alvarez smiled. "Yes, he almost never smiles." "Also true." Damien folded his arms. He smiled because of Autumn. Lorenzo waited. And? I dislike it. You dislike smiling? I dislike him smiling at her. Lorenzo closed his eyes for a long moment. There it is. Again. The boss who negotiated billion-dollar mergers without blinking had somehow developed an irrational rivalry with every man who happened to enjoy talking to his assistant. Unfortunately, that included almost everyone. By lunchtime, Autumn had already spoken with receptionists, delivery drivers, junior lawyers, accountants, kitchen staff, security officers, 2 executives, and 1 elderly janitor who insisted she try homemade soup his wife had prepared. She thanked every single one of them with exactly the same warm smile. Damien noticed every conversation, every smile, every laugh, every unnecessary second. By the time lunch ended, 1 young corporate attorney approached Autumn, carrying 2 coffees. I accidentally bought an extra latte. Oh? I was wondering if... Before he could finish, Damien appeared beside them with terrifying silence. I require Mr. Collins in conference room 4. The attorney jumped. Now. Yes, boss. He hurried away so quickly he forgot the second coffee. Autumn blinked. Poor Mr. Collins. Damien looked at the untouched latte. Why poor? He probably worked very hard this morning. Damien frowned. He did. He looked stressed. She picked up the abandoned coffee. I'll make sure he gets this later. Damien stared. She thought, the coffee wasn't for her? She genuinely believed the young lawyer had simply purchased an accidental extra drink, not because he wanted to spend time with her, not because he had been trying to ask her to lunch. She never even considered the possibility. For reasons Damien could not begin to understand, Autumn Sullivan remained completely unaware that half the unmarried men in his organization were quietly in love with her. He exhaled slowly. Then, without another word, turned and walked away. Behind him, Autumn cheerfully called after the retreating attorney, "Don't worry, Mr. Collins. I'll keep your coffee warm." Several employees nearby exchanged knowing looks. One security guard whispered, "He's getting transferred by Friday." By Friday morning, the prediction had come true. Jonathan Collins, the young attorney who had offered Autumn the extra latte, received an official transfer order. No explanation, no complaint, no appeal. He was reassigned to the firm's Chicago branch, effective Monday. The legal department stared at the email in disbelief. Jonathan stared even longer. "I've only worked here 8 months." His supervisor sighed. "I know. Did I make a mistake? Not that anyone can find." Then, why Chicago? The older attorney hesitated before lowering his voice. "Did you happen to speak with Miss Sullivan this week?" Jonathan frowned. "I offered her coffee." 3 nearby lawyers slowly turned toward him. One of them muttered, "Well." Another simply patted Jonathan's shoulder. "I'm going to miss you." Autumn, meanwhile, was busy organizing Damien's schedule for the following month. When Human Resources informed her about Jonathan's transfer, she smiled warmly. "Oh, that's wonderful." The HR manager blinked. "Wonderful? Chicago is a great opportunity." "You think so?" "I'm sure Mr. Collins earned it." The manager stared at her for several seconds. "You really believe that?" "Of course." As soon as Autumn returned to her desk, the HR manager hurried into the break room. "They're right." "What?" "She honestly thinks he's being promoted." Groans filled the room. "She's hopeless." Upstairs, Damien reviewed financial reports, while Lorenzo stood nearby, pretending to study inventory numbers. Jonathan accepted the transfer. Damien nodded once. "Good. You sent him away because he bought her coffee." "I sent him away because Chicago needs another attorney." Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. What remarkable timing. Damien ignored him. The following Tuesday introduced a completely new problem. Autumn arrived with her hair styled differently, Nothing dramatic. She had simply gathered her soft auburn curls into a loose braid that rested over one shoulder. Within 15 minutes, 3 women complimented it. 2 receptionists asked how she had done it. Then a newly hired associate walked into the executive office carrying documents. He stopped mid-sentence. "Miss Sullivan." "Yes?" "Your hair looks beautiful today." Autumn smiled politely. "That's kind of you." She immediately changed the subject. "Did you bring the merger contracts?" The associate looked mildly disappointed. "Yes." He handed over the files before leaving. Unfortunately, someone else had heard every word. Damien looked up from his office through the open doorway. "Autumn." "Yes, Mr. Marchetti?" "The Henderson contracts." "I'll bring them immediately." As she entered his office, Damien tried to focus on business. He truly did. Instead, the only thought occupying his mind was, he noticed her hair. Why did he notice her hair? He had never once commented on it. Not because he hadn't wanted to, because he had been afraid. Afraid that if he said she looked beautiful, she might realize exactly how dangerous his feelings had become. Across the desk, Autumn placed another folder beside him. "Is everything all right?" "Yes." "You seem distracted." "I'm not." She tilted her head. "You forgot to sign page 7. Damien looked down. She was right. Again. Without another word, he signed the document. Autumn smiled. "There. Thank you." She turned to leave. Damien almost spoke. Almost. "Your hair looks beautiful." The words reached the edge of his lips, then disappeared. Instead, he pressed the intercom. "Lorenzo." "Yes, boss?" "The new associate. What about him?" "Transfer him to the West Division." A pause. "Because?" "He'll be more useful there." Lorenzo looked toward the ceiling. Naturally. The security department began keeping unofficial records, not because anyone ordered them to, because the pattern had become impossible to ignore. Employee complimented Miss Sullivan. "Transfer." Employee laughed with Miss Sullivan. Night shift. Employee volunteered to help Miss Sullivan carry files. Assigned to another building. Employee invited Miss Sullivan to lunch. Out-of-state project. One afternoon, 2 bodyguards escorted Autumn across the parking garage after a late meeting. The younger guard told a terrible joke. Autumn laughed so hard she nearly dropped her folders. The older guard joined in. Both men laughed with her, all the way to the elevator. The next morning, they discovered their schedules had changed. Permanent overnight security. Neither spoke for almost a full minute. Finally, the younger guard whispered, "It was the joke. It was definitely the joke. I knew I shouldn't have told the joke." Still, nobody blamed Autumn. How could they? She remained exactly the same. She thanked everyone, remembered everyone's birthdays, asked about sick relatives, brought homemade chocolate chip cookies every Friday without fail. The kitchen staff adored her. The janitors adored her. The accountants adored her. Even veteran capos, men whose names inspired fear across entire states, found themselves smiling whenever she entered a room carrying fresh pastries. One Friday afternoon, Capo Miguel Alvarez approached her desk. "My wife wanted me to thank you." Autumn looked surprised. "For what?" "The anniversary dinner." She blinked. "I only helped reserve the restaurant. You also reminded me to buy flowers. You were very busy. You saved my marriage." Autumn laughed. "I doubt it." Miguel reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small box. My wife insisted. Inside rested a delicate silver bookmark engraved with tiny autumn leaves. "It's beautiful," she said. "Kind people deserve kind things." Autumn's eyes softened. "Please thank her for me." Miguel smiled warmly. "It'll make her day." From the hallway beyond the open office, Damien saw the exchange. He saw the smile. He saw Miguel lingering for another 10 seconds while Autumn admired the gift. 10 seconds. Far too long. That evening, Damien signed a new operational directive. Capo Miguel Alvarez would oversee negotiations in Las Vegas. Duration: 3 weeks. Lorenzo stared at the assignment order. Boss: Yes? Miguel is 62. I'm aware. He has been happily married for 37 years. I know. He wasn't flirting. Damien remained silent. Lorenzo sighed deeply. You've reached the stage where you're jealous of grandfathers. Damien finally looked up. He smiled at her. Lorenzo covered his face with one hand. We're all doomed. The following Monday, whispers traveled through every floor of Marchetti Holdings. Nobody could explain the mysterious transfers. Nobody understood the impossible scheduling changes, but everyone agreed on one thing. If a single man spent more than 5 minutes talking to Miss Autumn Sullivan, he should probably start packing his office. By the middle of the month, Marchetti Holdings had developed an unofficial game. Nobody admitted to organizing it. Nobody dared write the rules down. Yet somehow, everyone knew how to play. The question was always the same. Who's getting transferred next? It started in the employee cafeteria. 3 accountants watched a junior analyst carry a tray toward Autumn's table. He'll never make it. I give him 48 hours. Too generous. 24. The analyst smiled politely. Miss Sullivan, would you mind if I joined you? Autumn looked up from her lunch. Of course not. You always sit alone. I don't mind company. The 3 accountants exchanged sympathetic looks. One quietly folded a $5 bill and slid it across the table. I had 24 hours. You win. The analyst lasted until 3 o'clock that afternoon. His manager informed him that he had been selected for a special financial audit initiative at another office. Temporary assignment. 2 months. When the news spread through accounting, nobody looked surprised. Someone merely crossed another name off the betting sheet. Autumn remained blissfully unaware. She assumed the company was expanding. It must be exciting, she told one receptionist. What is? All these new projects. The receptionist bit the inside of her cheek. Yes. So many people are traveling lately. Exactly. I hope they're not working too hard. The receptionist waited until Autumn disappeared around the corner before whispering, She's the only person in America who could miss this. The kitchen staff adapted first. Whenever Autumn entered the cafeteria, the younger male cooks mysteriously vanished into storage rooms. Only older women and one grumpy 68-year-old chef remained visible. One afternoon, Autumn frowned. Where's Daniel? The chef answered without looking up. Inventory. And Kevin? Inventory. The new pastry chef. Also inventory. Autumn blinked. You must have a very large pantry. The chef coughed to hide a laugh. You have no idea. The security division became even more creative. Bodyguards who once joked freely with Autumn suddenly developed remarkable self-control whenever Damien appeared. Morning, Miss Sullivan. Good morning. Beautiful weather. Yes. S. Have a nice day. They walked away before accidentally smiling. One rookie guard forgot the new survival strategy. Autumn handed him a homemade oatmeal cookie. He grinned. My grandmother used to bake these. Across the lobby, Damien looked up from a conversation with 2 capos. The rookie froze. His smile disappeared instantly. He saluted, then marched directly toward the nearest exit without being dismissed. One capo watched him leave. Where's he going? Another shrugged. Probably updating his resume. Lorenzo eventually confiscated the betting pool. Not because gambling bothered him, because the wagers had become ridiculous. I've got $50 on the IT manager. No chance. He complimented her spreadsheet. That doesn't count. It absolutely counts. What are the official rules? The boss decides the rules. The boss decides the rules. Fair point. Lorenzo sighed. You people realize you're betting on your co-workers' careers. The room fell silent. Someone slowly raised a hand. Can we at least keep the scoreboard? Lorenzo pinched the bridge of his nose. I work for children. The only person suffering more than the employees was Damien himself. Every ridiculous order bought him a few hours of peace. Then another man would smile at Autumn. Another conversation, another laugh, another reminder that the warm, gentle woman sitting outside his office could have chosen anyone. Instead, she remained completely oblivious. One evening, long after most employees had gone home, Damien walked past her desk. Autumn was still working. Stacks of color-coded folders surrounded her. You should go home. She looked up. I just need to finish tomorrow's board schedule. It can wait. I know. She smiled. But if I finish tonight, everyone can leave earlier tomorrow. Everyone. Not herself. Everyone else. Damien watched her reorganize 3 executive calendars, answer 2 emails, and notice an error hidden deep inside a vendor contract. You missed a decimal. She pointed at the document. The payment amount doesn't match page 12. Damien checked. She was right. Again. You caught that immediately. I've read this contract 6 times. No. He looked directly at her. You remembered it. Autumn gave a small shrug. I suppose. You always remember. She laughed softly. My memory is useful. Useful? That was how she described the talent that had quietly saved the organization hundreds of costly mistakes. Damien wanted to tell her she was extraordinary. Instead, he simply nodded. Go home. She gathered her things. Good night, Mr. Marchetti. Good night, Autumn. She paused. It was one of the rare occasions he had used her first name. A gentle smile crossed her face. See you tomorrow. She left. Damien stood in the silent office for several moments after the elevator doors closed. Lorenzo stepped from the hallway. You almost told her. I know. What stopped you? Damien stared at the empty desk. What if she says no? Lorenzo nearly laughed. The man who negotiated peace between 5 rival families is terrified of asking one woman to dinner. Damien answered without hesitation. Those negotiations were easier. The following week brought someone new. Cassandra Blake. Elegant, perfectly tailored suit, impeccable posture, degrees from prestigious universities. A corporate consultant hired to modernize the public image of Marchetti Holdings before several high-profile international partnerships. She spent her first morning observing every department. Efficient, professional, analytical. Then she noticed Autumn, an executive assistant, laughing with janitors while carrying a box of birthday cupcakes. Employees from every level stopped to greet her. Security guards opened doors before she reached them. Senior executives thanked her by name. Even Kapos listened when she reminded them about appointments. Cassandra frowned. She turned toward a department director. Who is she? Miss Sullivan. The assistant. Yes. Cassandra watched another employee beam after speaking with Autumn. Interesting. What is? I've never seen an organization revolve around an assistant. The director smiled. You'll understand. I doubt that. She continued watching Autumn from across the lobby. A different conclusion had already formed in her mind. Influence like that could not possibly have been earned. Someone that ordinary, someone who looked like that, could never command this much loyalty on competence alone. There had to be another explanation, and Cassandra Blake intended to find it. Cassandra Blake did not believe in coincidence. Organizations functioned because of structure. Power belonged to those who earned it through measurable results. Popularity was pleasant. Competence was essential. Yet after only 2 weeks inside Marchetti Holdings, she observed something she could not explain. Every department trusted Autumn Sullivan. Security consulted her before changing schedules. Executives confirmed meetings through her. Even veteran capos stopped by her desk, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely valued her opinion. It made no sense. An executive assistant should never possess that much influence. Unless she had acquired it through someone else's emotions, and there was only one person powerful enough to make that happen. Damian Marchetti. Cassandra began quietly investigating. She reviewed internal reports, interviewed department heads, observed meetings from the back of conference rooms. Again and again, she reached the same conclusion. Damian rarely praised Autumn in public, rarely even looked at her for long. Yet somehow, every important decision flowed through her desk. Appointments, contracts, travel, executive coordination. The entire organization seemed to orbit around one remarkably ordinary woman. Cassandra mistook trust for favoritism, and once she believed that, every harmless interaction became evidence. The rumors started small. Perhaps Miss Sullivan enjoys unusual influence. I hear the boss never refuses her requests. Interesting, isn't it? Within days, whispers spread across departments. Autumn noticed people becoming strangely quiet whenever she approached. Conversations ended abruptly. Smiles became awkward. She assumed everyone was simply busy. Until one afternoon, she entered the executive lounge carrying fresh coffee. The room fell silent. Cassandra stood near the windows. I was just discussing organizational standards. Autumn smiled politely. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. Cassandra folded her arms. Actually, Miss Sullivan, perhaps you can answer a question. Of course. What professional qualifications justify your extraordinary level of authority? The room became perfectly still. Autumn blinked. Authority? You coordinate executive operations. I organize schedules. You advise department heads. They usually ask where Mr. Marchetti is available. You communicate with capos. Mostly about meeting times. Cassandra smiled thinly. Curious. I'm sorry? I've simply never seen an assistant become this influential. Autumn lowered her eyes. I only try to help. Of course. The words sounded polite. The tone did not. By the following week, the whispers had become impossible to ignore. Some newer employees quietly questioned whether Autumn had manipulated Damian emotionally. Others wondered whether competence alone could truly explain her position. Most long-time employees dismissed the rumors immediately. They had witnessed too many moments when Autumn quietly saved entire projects without asking for recognition. But rumors never required evidence, only repetition. Autumn finally overheard them. She had returned to retrieve forgotten documents. 2 junior consultants stood around the corner. I heard she controls the boss. No wonder everyone gets transferred. She's probably using his feelings. Autumn stopped walking. Using him? She remained hidden until they left, then slowly returned to her empty desk. For the first time in 3 years, she wondered whether everyone had misunderstood her kindness. She remembered every transferred employee, every strange policy, every awkward silence. Had she become the reason people feared speaking to one another? Had she unknowingly damaged the workplace she loved? That evening, she typed a resignation letter. It contained only 3 paragraphs. A thank you, an apology, a promise that leaving would restore harmony. She placed it inside an envelope, then quietly cried for the first time since joining Marchetti Holdings. The following morning, Damian arrived unusually early. Autumn's desk was already organized, every meeting prepared, every file color-coded. An envelope rested neatly in the center, his name written in careful handwriting. He opened it. The color drained from his face. Lorenzo found him 5 minutes later. "Boss?" Damien handed him the letter without speaking. Lorenzo read silently, then looked up. "She thinks she's hurting you." Damien closed his eyes. "No, she thinks she's hurting everyone. Every ridiculous transfer, every jealous decision, every childish attempt to keep other men away." Autumn had interpreted none of it as affection. Instead, she believed she had become a burden. Damien finally understood the truth. The person he had spent years trying to protect had been wounded most by his own behavior. That afternoon, the annual leadership summit began. Capos. Corporate executives, legal advisors, international partners. Every senior figure inside the Marchetti organization gathered in the grand conference hall. Cassandra stepped confidently toward the presentation screen. Her report focused on organizational modernization. Then came her final recommendation. For this organization to maintain credibility with future partners. She paused deliberately. Personal relationships must never interfere with executive leadership. Several people exchanged uneasy looks. Cassandra continued. An assistant whose influence depends upon emotional favoritism damages institutional integrity. The implication hung heavily in the room. Autumn sat quietly near the back. She had already decided to leave after the meeting. No scene, no argument, just gratitude, then goodbye. Before Cassandra could continue, a calm voice interrupted. "That's enough." Damien rose slowly from his chair. The room fell silent. He walked toward the center of the conference hall. Not angry, not shouting, simply composed. "Cassandra." "Yes, Mr. Marchetti? You've spent weeks evaluating my organization." "I have. You believe Miss Sullivan weakens it." "I believe objectivity is important." Damien nodded once. "So do I." He turned toward the audience. "Allow me to provide a few objective facts." He pressed a button. A presentation appeared behind him. Project timelines, financial recoveries, contract revisions, crisis reports. For the past 3 years, his voice remained steady. Every major operational success presented here contains one common factor. Another slide appeared. Autumn's handwritten scheduling notes, corrected contract dates, travel adjustments, emergency contingency plans. She prevented 2 executive scheduling conflicts that would have cost this organization nearly $40 million. Another slide. She discovered forged signatures hidden inside acquisition documents. Another. She remembered details every department overlooked. Another. She reorganized disaster responses during 3 separate security emergencies. Around the room, expressions changed. Executives slowly remembered. The meetings she had saved. The mistakes she had quietly corrected. The impossible deadlines somehow achieved. Without seeking credit. Without demanding praise. Always smiling. Always helping. Damien looked directly at every leader in the room. "You believed she was simply my assistant." Silence. "The truth is," he turned toward Autumn, "she is the reason this organization functions whenever I'm not in the room." No one spoke. Even Cassandra remained speechless. Damien continued. "I trusted her long before I loved her." Autumn's head lifted sharply. The room collectively stopped breathing. "I loved her long before I admitted it to myself." A capo near the front discreetly elbowed another. "I told you." "You owe me $100. Damien walked toward Autumn. His confident stride suddenly became strangely uncertain. For the first time in years, the most feared mafia boss in America looked nervous. He stopped in front of her. "Autumn." She blinked through tears. "I'm sorry." She stared. "I convinced myself I was protecting you." He smiled sadly. "I was actually making your life harder." The room listened in absolute silence. I cannot change those mistakes. He took one slow breath. But I can stop hiding. His voice softened. So, a faint smile finally reached his face. If I'm no longer your boss after work, he hesitated. Would you finally let me take you to dinner? For several seconds, Autumn simply stared at him. Then another realization slowly appeared. Her eyes widened. She looked around the room, then back at Damien. So, she laughed through happy tears. That's why everyone kept getting transferred. The silence shattered. The conference hall erupted with laughter. Even hardened capos covered their faces. One executive nearly fell out of his chair. Lorenzo closed his eyes. It took her 3 years. Damien laughed for the first time anyone could remember. Yes, it was because of me. Entirely. You were. Jealous? Hopelessly. Autumn shook her head in amazement. I thought you were becoming very passionate about workplace efficiency. The laughter only grew louder. Several months later, Marchetti Holdings operated more smoothly than ever. Damien no longer invented mysterious transfer policies. At least, not many. Whenever a young single employee volunteered to help Autumn with lunch, senior staff quietly whispered, "Good luck." The capos developed a favorite joke. The fastest way to receive an out-of-state assignment: compliment Miss Sullivan's cookies. Even Damien eventually learned to laugh. Most of the time. One afternoon, a visiting executive smiled at Autumn while thanking her for homemade brownies. Damien's expression darkened almost instantly. Autumn noticed. Without saying a word, she slipped her hand into his. He looked down. She smiled. "Relax, boss." His stern expression softened immediately. "I'm going home with you." Every intimidating trace disappeared from his face. Several nearby capos groaned dramatically. There he goes again. The boss has been defeated. By holding hands, Lorenzo shook his head with a smile. We survived gang wars. We survived federal investigations. We survived corporate takeovers. But nothing. He watched Damien looking at Autumn with unmistakable affection. Was ever capable of defeating Damien Marchetti, quite like one kind-hearted woman who spent 3 years believing everyone was simply being professional. The hallway filled with warm laughter. And somewhere inside the world's most intimidating mafia empire, the most feared man in America, silently accepted a truth no amount of power could change. Love had never made him weaker. It had simply introduced him to the only person whose smile mattered more than his pride.